Right. Imagine being so outnumbered that any sane person would just surrender.
Yeah.
You've got 6,000 hungry, poorly equipped soldiers facing down 20,000 of the most fearsome warriors in all of Europe. Your enemies got the best armor money can buy, the finest horses, archers who can pierce steel from 100 yards away, and absolute confidence they're about to slaughter you. Most commanders would be writing their surrender letter. But Robert the Bruce, he looked at those odds and thought, right then, let's have them. What happens next at a place called Bannockburn will go down as one of the most spectacular military victories in British history. A battle so brilliant, so audacious, that 700 years later, we're still talking about it. If that grabs your attention, stick around because this story is absolutely mental. It's June 30 and 14, and we're in the Scottish Highlands. Picture the scene: rolling hills, dense forests, a small river cutting through muddy terrain, and somewhere in all that, a relatively tiny Scottish army is preparing to face the full might of England. Now, to really understand why this battle mattered so much, why it wasn't just another medieval scrap, we need to rewind the clock a bit and look at what Scotland had been going through. Scotland at this point wasn't even an independent country anymore. King Edward I of England and this bloke had earned himself the rather intimidating nickname, Hammer of the Scots, had absolutely battered Scotland into submission. We're talking brutal, complete domination. Scottish nobles had been forced to kneel before him and swear loyalty, and those who refused, executed without mercy. You've probably heard of William Wallace, the legendary resistance fighter. Even he ended up captured, dragged to London, and executed in the most horrific way imaginable: hanged, drawn, and quartered. His body parts displayed across the country as a warning to anyone else thinking about rebellion. Scotland looked finished, properly done and dusted. But then this bloke called Robert the Bruce steps onto the stage. He was a Scottish nobleman with a legitimate claim to the crown, but his path to power was complicated, to put it mildly. In 1306, he murdered a rival inside a church. A church? That's sacrilege of the highest order, and it nearly cost him everything. The Pope excommunicated him. Half of Scotland thought he'd lost his mind, and the English thought it was hilarious. But instead of running away with his tail between his legs, Bruce did something absolutely audacious. He had himself crowned King of Scotland. The English practically fell over laughing. A king without land. A king without a proper army. An excommunicated king. What a joke, right? Except Bruce wasn't joking, not even slightly. For the next 8 years, he waged what we'd now call guerrilla warfare. He avoided massive set-piece battles, where England's superior numbers would crush him. Instead, he fought smart. Castle by castle, town by town, ambush by ambush. He wore down the English occupiers. Year after year, slowly but surely, he recaptured Scottish territory. By 1314, he controlled almost the entire country. Almost. There was one crucial fortress still in English hands: Stirling Castle. Now, Stirling wasn't just any castle. It was the key to the whole kingdom. Whoever controlled Stirling controlled the main route between the Highlands in the north and the lowlands in the south. Control Stirling, control Scotland. Bruce's brother Edward had been laying siege to the place for months, and eventually he struck a rather clever deal with the English commander inside. If no English relief force arrived by the 24th of June, the castle would surrender peacefully. Sounds like a trap for the English, doesn't it? Because that's exactly what it was. When King Edward II of England, son of the Hammer of the Scots, heard about this agreement, he was absolutely furious. He couldn't just let such an important fortress fall without putting up a fight. It would be humiliating, an absolute embarrassment. So he did what any self-respecting medieval king would do. He gathered the biggest army England had assembled in years. We're talking 20,000 men. 20,000. And not just any soldiers. 2,500 heavy cavalier, absolute elite of English military power. Knights in full armor on massive war. 3,000 Welsh longbowmen, whose arrows could punch straight through armor at range. And thousands upon thousands of infantry. This army marched north with complete confidence that they were about to crush the Scottish rebellion once and for all. Edward was so certain of victory that he'd already started planning his victory celebrations. But Robert de Bruce knew they were coming, and here's where his military genius really shows. He didn't panic. He didn't flee. He prepared. And he prepared brilliantly. First, he chose his battlefield with incredible care. There was a narrow strip of land between a small river, called the Bannockburn, and the dense forests of an area called the New Park. This terrain was absolutely perfect for what he had in mind. The English wouldn't be able to deploy their massive numerical advantage properly. Their cavalry couldn't spread out and outflank. They'd be funneled into a killing zone. Then Bruce got his men digging. Thousands of small holes, carefully concealed with branches and grass. Invisible death traps, designed specifically for horses. Imagine a massive war horse galloping at full speed, suddenly having its leg plunge into a hidden pit. Catastrophic. He also trained his soldiers in a formation called the Shieldtrin. Picture circles of men bristling with spears 3 meters long. These spears all pointing outward like a human hedgehog. Against cavalry charges, these formations were nearly impenetrable. A horse simply won't charge into a wall of spear points. It's against their nature. On the 23rd of June, the English army arrived, and what happened next became the stuff of legend. An English knight named Henry de Bohun spotted Robert the Bruce riding out in front of his troops. Bruce was armed only with a battle axe and mounted on a small pony-nothing compared to the massive war horses the English knights rode. De Bohun saw his chance for eternal glory. He lowered his lance, spurred his horse, and charged. The King of Scotland on his little pony, facing down one of the most feared knights in all of England, armed with nothing but an axe. The entire battlefield went quiet, watching this insane confrontation unfold. At the absolute last possible moment, Bruce swerved aside. As de Bohun thundered past, Bruce stood up in his stirrups and brought his axe down with everything he had. The blow split de Bohun's helmet clean in two, and his skull. The axe handle actually shattered from the sheer force of the impact. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the Scottish army absolutely erupted. Their kin had just killed an English champion in single combat. Morale went through the roof. Bruce's officers apparently told him off for taking such a ridiculous risk, but the psychological impact was enormous. That night, the English commanders had a proper debate about what to do next. Some of the more experienced leaders wanted to wait, let the troops rest properly, scout for better ground, maybe find a position that wasn't quite so awful. But King Edward was impatient. The deadline for Stirling was tomorrow. He ordered an immediate attack for the morning. It would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. Dawn broke on the 24th of June, and the English army advanced. They had to cross the Bannockburn and squeeze through that narrow terrain Bruce had chosen. The heavy cavalry led the charge, as was traditional. They expected the Scots to do what Scottish armies always did when faced with English knights turn and run, but the Scots didn't flee. The Shieldtrans held firm. The first wave of English cavalry smashed straight into an absolute wall of spears. Horses screamed and fell, throwing their riders. The knights behind couldn't stop in time and plowed straight into the chaos. More horses stumbled into those hidden pits Bruce had dug. Riders in full armor, once they fell, couldn't get back up. They were too heavy. The armor too restrictive. The English archers tried to help, but the terrain was so narrow and the two armies were so close together that they could unshoot without hitting their own men. Their arrows started striking English soldiers. Chaos. Bruce had held back his 500 light cavalry for exactly this moment. Now he sent them smashing into the archers. Without support from the heavy cavalry, which was completely stuck in the bottleneck, the archers just fled. Hour after hour, the English army squeezed together on that narrow strip of land. At the front, men fought desperately against the spear walls. Behind them, thousands more pushed forward, unable to actually fight, unable to even see what was happening. The heat was unbearable. Men in full plate armor started collapsing from exhaustion and heat stroke. The dead piled up so high that soldiers had to literally climb over mountains of corpses. It was absolute carnage. Then came the moment that decided everything. Bruce had held back a reserve force, the men of Argyll, under a leader called Angus Arg MacDonald. Fresh troops who hadn't been fighting all day. He threw them into the battle at the crucial moment. At exactly the same time, a new group appeared on a nearby hill. It was the Scottish baggage train servants, camp followers. Basically anyone who'd come along with the army armed with whatever they could find. Pitchforks, clubs, kitchen knives. To the exhausted, desperate English soldiers, they looked like a whole fresh army. It was too much. Someone shouted treason. Others screamed. "Retreat!" Panic spread through the English ranks like wildfire. King Edward was physically dragged away by his bodyguards, almost by force. His army collapsed. What was supposed to be an organized, disciplined retreat became a complete rout. Men threw away their weapons, their armor, anything that would slow them down. They plunged into the Bannockburn, desperately trying to swim to the other side. Many drowned under the weight of their equipment. Others were cut down by pursuing Scots. The slaughter was horrific. Entire noble families of England were wiped out that day. Over 4,000 English soldiers died. Many more were captured, including dozens of high-ranking nobles. The ransoms Bruce collected from these prisoners financed his entire kingdom for years. The Scots, by contrast, lost fewer than 500 men. It was one of the most lopsided victories in medieval military history. But Bannockburn was so much more than just a battle. It was proof, undeniable, spectacular proof. England was not invincible. That discipline, proper tactics, and brilliant leadership could defeat overwhelming numbers and superior equipment. Robert de Bruce was now, without any shadow of doubt, the rightful king of Scotland. England tried for years to reconquer Scotland, launched multiple campaigns, but after the momentum was broken. They never got that dominance back. In 1328, England finally, officially recognized Scottish independence in the Treaty of Edinburgh. Think about what Bruce achieved here. Outnumbered more than 3-1, facing the finest heavy cavalry in Europe, fighting against longbowmen who'd terrorized battlefields for decades. And he not only won, he absolutely humiliated one of the most powerful armies in the world. He did it through brilliant tactical planning, perfect use of terrain, understanding his enemy's weaknesses, and sheer bloody-minded determination never to give up even when the odds looked impossible. This is the kind of history that reminds us why studying the past actually matters. These weren't just names in a dusty textbook or dates to memorize for an exam. These were real people making impossible decisions, facing down overwhelming odds, changing the entire course of nations. Robert de Bruce started as a murderer and an outcast, and ended up as one of Scotland's greatest heroes. That's the power of refusing to accept defeat. If you've stuck with this story all the way to the end, we genuinely appreciate it. This is exactly the kind of historical deep dive we love. Creating the battles and moments that shaped our world, told in a way that makes you feel like you were actually there. If you enjoyed learning about Bannockburn, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. We're constantly putting out new content covering everything from medieval battles to ancient civilizations to pivotal moments that changed everything. Drop a comment telling us what historical event you'd like us to tackle next. We actually read them and take suggestions seriously. And if you really want to support what we're doing here, consider leaving a super thanks. Every bit helps us keep researching and bringing you these stories. Thanks for watching. And remember, never let anyone tell you the odds are too long. Robert de Bruce certainly didn't. Catch you in the next one.